Hello there. Welcome to the Saroy channel, wherever you are in the world, and so much love to each and every one of you. I do hope you're doing remarkably well. I'm doing great, thank you very much. And I really want to say thank you to those of you who support me and buy me coffee. I really appreciate it so very much. Now let's get on with part 2 of our story, shall we? A very exciting story it is, and we'll see where it leads. But before we do, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. Click the notification bell and the thumbs up. And let's continue with part 2 of our story. How can I say this, James? Deborah has always lived a rather pampered, indulgent life. She seems to expect to be treated like a princess all the time. I've got nothing against that. I only worry that it's going to set her up for a huge fall. And one day she's going to come crashing down to earth with a mighty big bang. My husband used to say that maybe in a previous lifetime, our girl was an Egyptian princess, a daughter of the great pharaoh like Ramses II perhaps, entering this world with memories of her past life, and as a consequence appears to have a natural attitude of self-entitlement. Don't get me wrong, we both love our daughter to death, especially my husband, who believes his little princess can do no wrong. He finds it close to impossible to refuse Deborah anything, which didn't help with her hoity-toity attitude growing up. Sometimes I think Deborah was born in the wrong family, James. Her father should probably be a billionaire investor, and her mother a socialite mixing in high society circles, wearing the latest designer creations. But alas, our Deborah is stuck with us. She came out of the wrong womb, although she never lacked for anything in her life with us. But, as I say, her life has been pretty humble, to say the very least, although you would expect it to have been otherwise. Well, I don't know why she's interested in me then, Ruth, if that is the case, James had said honestly. I'm head over heels in love with your daughter, of course, but I will admit that if she thinks I'm going to be a multi-millionaire one of these days, she's sadly mistaken. If she thinks I'll be able to give her that jet-setter lifestyle that she probably wants, she will be disappointed. I have a mediocre job. I make a decent income, Ruth, but I doubt I'll ever be one of those mega-wealthy people. Unless, of course, I get to win the lottery one of these days. But I'm more likely to be struck by lightning than for that to happen. But I guess you can dream, can't you? Mrs. Neeson had looked sympathetic. For your sake, James, I wish you were a millionaire, only because it would make your life a whole lot easier with my daughter. She can be so demanding at the very best of times, and her extravagant disposition seems to know no bounds. The great news is I can tell she really loves you, James, and you do treat her very well. In the end, that's all that really matters. Our lives are not about money or material things, but about the relationships we have with other people. I hope one day Deborah will learn that. Maybe it's a lesson you can teach her, James, in your relationship. You love my daughter dearly. Maybe she'll understand how much more precious that is than all the luxuries in the entire world. You only have to look at television stars and see these people earning million-dollar salaries, and the whole lot of them look completely miserable, do they not? Their lives are saturated with extreme privilege and financial advantages. They want for nothing. Yet if you look at them closely, some of them almost seem very, very sad, as if their whole lives are empty. Perhaps they realize once you have everything that money can buy, there really is nothing you can aspire to. I always say to my husband, James, look at them. They wouldn't know what happiness was, even if it hit them square in the face with a baseball bat. And I would never swap with my life with any of them for sure. My advice to you, young man, is don't let Deborah manipulate you. She has a propensity to do that, you know. At the end of the day, even though my daughter acts like a princess, maybe underneath all the delusional layers, she's in touch with her humble roots after all. I'd really like to think so. Mrs. Neeson, I hope this is not out of order for me to ask you something so personal about Deborah, but she never talks about any of her ex-boyfriends to me. Ostensibly, when I ask her about the people she used to go out with, she shuts me down almost at once, waves her hand in the air dismissively, and says, "Oh, that's in the past. I don't want to talk about it." I don't mind admitting to you, Mrs. Neeson, it bothers me a whole lot. I'd like to know everything there is to know about your daughter, since she was a baby to her dating life. I know it's good to focus on the future, of course, but our past also contributes greatly to making us who we are today. I'm interested to learn about the people she used to date. I'm assuming they were a lot wealthier than I am, but I wouldn't expect anything less from Deborah. Yes, I can't say it surprises me that Deborah clams up about her past. I don't know why she's inclined to be like that. Maybe she's a chip off the old block, as her father is also the kind of person that never likes to look backwards but only forward. Not that that's a bad thing, of course. Deborah has been out with many men over the years, as you probably know, but only 2 were serious relationships, and neither of them ended well, which is why Deborah probably doesn't want to talk about those relationships. They were serious, with 2 very pretentious young men, I have to say. And maybe that's why Deborah was drawn to them in the very first place. She was probably attracted to their great affluence and wealth. They drove flash cars and had hefty bank accounts that were bursting at the seams. I will say those 2 men she dated were genuinely shocked that my daughter didn't live in an ivory castle, and that her parents were pretty ordinary folk. I'm quite sure we were a disappointment to them. In the end, those relationships didn't last, but neither of those men were very nice. They didn't have your charm, James, not even in their tiny finger. One of the boyfriends described my daughter as a gold digger, and the other described her as high maintenance. And what do you say, Ruth? Do you think your daughter is any of those things? I mean, if she's a gold digger, why would she go out with the likes of me? Well, that's a very good question, James, and I'm not sure I'm actually equipped to answer it for you. My daughter can be quite a complicated person at the best of times, and easily misunderstood. Of course she likes the finer things in her life, and being treated extremely well. And don't get me wrong, there's nothing wrong with that. But people can falsely assume the worst about her, given she can come across rather like a pampered pooch. But you do make an excellent point, James. She'd never dream of going out with you, if she was only after a man with very deep pockets. I can see she genuinely loves you, James. But I'm warning you, don't let her frivolous extravagances bring you down. And if you get very serious with my daughter, don't ever get her to control the finances, or you will be doomed. My daughter is completely clueless with money. She has a great job, earns an excellent salary, but she spends her money very liberally on designer gear, and has been living with us so she doesn't have to pay rent and so forth. Sometimes I don't know where her money goes. If the 2 of you do get married one day, make sure she has an allowance from you and doesn't touch the funds connected to savings or paying bills. Because if you aren't astute like that, where my daughter is concerned, you'll find yourself surfing in some troubled waters, believe me, and that will not be a comfortable position to find yourself in. I remember my husband once gave my daughter pocket money to last a month when she was 11 years old. She blew it in one day on something ridiculously overpriced. I don't think she can help herself in that way. You've seen how my daughter presents herself, the clothes she wears. She very much likes to live the pampered life and buy herself exclusive things. If you didn't know where Deborah came from, you would genuinely believe she was a very wealthy young lady. I've tried to encourage her to be modest over the years, but Deborah doesn't know the meaning of the word. I haven't put you off her, have I? Asked Ruth, suddenly looking quite concerned. I want Deborah to be extremely happy, and I believe, James, that you could make her very happy, and that you would be extremely good for her. At the same time, I don't want you to go into your relationship with rose-coloured spectacles, because as beautiful as my daughter may be, there are many things about her that would challenge most men, let me assure you. And dating my daughter is not for the faint of heart, shall we say. Don't worry, Ruth. You couldn't put me off Deborah even if you wanted to, although, of course, I wish you could. For some reason I've fallen for her very hard. But despite my obvious passions for her, I'm very much aware of how materialistic your daughter is. But I think I can handle her. Mrs. Neeson had drawn James into a big, loving hug. Oh, I'm so pleased you said that, James. You have no idea. I was worried for a second that I'd succeeded in turning you right off my daughter, and I wouldn't want that to happen. I really want her to be happy, and I think you may be the perfect man for her, even though you're not a millionaire," she said teasingly. "Although I dare say, even if you were, you'd still have to keep tabs on your finances, because if my daughter had free rein over any man's money, she'd be like a kid in a candy store, and if you didn't watch out, your great fortune would be whittled away in no time at all. And I'm not joking either, even though I wish I was." James knew what Ruth Neeson had told him was absolutely true, but nothing that woman could have said could have put him off her daughter. He was in love with Deborah, and the language of love can be incongruously complicated, for sometimes it's hard to fathom what it is about a person that brings out in us those soppy feelings that are not always easy to explain or comprehend. There was no doubt from James's perspective that he'd certainly have had an easier life if he'd fallen for a less demanding woman. He knew that if his best friend Noah was caught up in a relationship with a woman like Deborah, he would have advised him not to get involved with such a woman, for it might have been a bumpy ride for him. James could not explain why he'd been so irrationally drawn to Deborah from the very first moment they met, even though she'd been quite objectionable and obnoxious on their very first date, and the way she'd reacted over her missing purse would have left most men running, glad to see the back of the woman, believing that they had dodged a bullet. Yet with all Deborah's idiosyncrasies and eccentric behaviours, somehow James felt quite enchanted and beguiled by her, as if he was completely caught under her love spell. Noah had warned him not to go out with the likes of Deborah Neeson, unless of course he wanted to become impoverished and broke for the rest of his life. "That girlfriend of yours needs to go out with someone who's a multi-millionaire, not the likes of you. Someone who owns a fancy yacht, possibly, and can take her to exotic locations around the world." Yet despite what the naysayers had said about Deborah, James could not help himself. Deborah had successfully reeled him in, like a trout at the end of a fisherman's line, and there really was no escape for him. So maybe he was doomed. But on the contrary, James appeared excited about his future with Deborah, and was looking extremely forward to spending the rest of his life with her. As after all, life with a girl like Deborah, who keeps you on your toes, would never ever get boring. Yes, he'd admitted to himself very honestly that Deborah was extremely extravagant. She was overindulgent. She could never be trusted to manage the finances in their relationship, just as Ruth Neeson had so wisely warned. Indeed, James had been immensely grateful to Ruth Neeson for her open and honest advice about her daughter. Not many potential mother-in-laws would tell you the good, bad and ugly about their offspring, but Ruth Neeson hadn't hesitated in that regard to be completely honest with James. She wanted her daughter to have a marriage that lasted, and she probably knew that not many men would be able to handle the likes of her daughter. So she wanted James to know what he was getting into before he ended up breaking her daughter's heart. When Mr. Neeson had had a private word with James about Deborah, he had praised his daughter, talking about her as if she deserved to be put on a pedestal and worshipped as some kind of demigod. James had privately wondered to himself if Deborah's father was responsible for enabling her to become so self-entitled, because it seemed he was incapable of refusing her anything. "I can see, young man, you are very in love with my daughter," Mr. Neeson had said. "Is it that obvious?" asked James. He thought he'd hidden his fixation over Deborah rather well, but Mr. Neeson seemed to have read him like an open book. "I didn't know I wore my heart on my sleeve like that," James had said rather gingerly. "Nothing wrong with that, young man," said Mr. Neeson. "I can see Deborah's in love with you, and that you feel exactly the same way about her, and that makes me exceedingly happy. I like you very much, James. I believe you'll be good for my daughter, and I mean that sincerely. To tell you the truth, I never really liked my daughter's other boyfriends. She was far too good for the lot of them. She's my princess, and if you treat her like one, James, I shall have no grievances with you, and will warmly welcome you as a member of the Neeson family. I'll do my best, Mr. Neeson, to take care of Deborah for you, because your daughter is extremely special to me. But I feel I must warn you, Mr. Neeson, I'm not perfect, I'm afraid. I do have my imperfections, and one of my worst traits is I can be rather short-tempered and get a little cranky at times." Mr. Neeson had patted James jovially on the back and said, "I can live with you being a little cranky, James. You can ask my wife about me.
I myself am predisposed to having a short fuse. I'm very glad that you're so honest and direct with me, James. I appreciate your integrity, and the fact that you say you're not perfect. But then again, who is? We all have our imperfections. As I was saying, if you do your best to make my daughter happy, what more can I ask for? You'll hear no complaints from me on that score. Of that you can rest assured. My daughter's dated many young men over the years, James, but I've never seen her look so radiantly happy as she does now. So you're already succeeding in making my daughter very contented, and that makes me extremely satisfied as her father. Indeed, I'm most sure that every father only wants the best for their son or daughter, as I'm sure you appreciate, James. You will understand where I'm coming from on this when you have children yourself. Thank you, Mr. Neeson, for that vote of confidence, James had said. By all accounts, James genuinely believed that Deborah Neeson had a good heart underneath it all. And besides, what was wrong with having an appreciation for life's luxuries? It didn't make you a bad person. Maybe when she got significantly older, and they had children together, she'd grow out of some of her materialistic fixations, as she began to focus on family affairs, and cared more about raising her children than buying the next designer luxury handbag. James had decided that the money Deborah earned from her job she'd be able to keep for herself, for that would make her extremely happy. Then she could spend her money in any way she wished, treating herself to luxury items that she craved. So that need within her to enjoy those privileges would at least be fulfilled. James had assured Deborah that that is what they would do when they were married, and he decided the money he earned would be used for all the necessities of their lives, from the mortgage to the food bills, as James had little interest in luxury items for himself. James realized that with a wedding potentially looming closely on the threshold of his life, along with an engagement that he needed to crown with a diamond ring, that the pressure was beginning to really mount on him, and he was becoming increasingly more anxious. Even Mr. Neeson was annoyingly asking him over and over again why he hadn't popped the question with his daughter yet. "Do it as soon as possible if you want my advice," he had encouraged James. "Me and the wife will ensure the two of you will have a wedding you shall never forget, with no expense spared on my part. Incidentally, for your wedding present, I'll pay for the both of you to go somewhere exotic for your honeymoon. I'm not a rich man, James, by any manner of means, and you probably know that, but I would give Deborah the world if given half the chance." James had assured Mr. Neeson that once he had acquired the engagement ring from the jewellers, he would pop the question with his daughter. James knew on this beautiful evening, at this delightful, wholesome Italian restaurant, he had to ask this one thing of Deborah Neeson, and he wasn't sure he actually had the courage to do it. On seeing her look at him over the dinner table, with those brown, inquiring eyes of hers, that in his humble opinion could melt butter on an icy cold day, for a moment James felt completely lost for words, almost as if he'd suddenly forgotten exactly what he was going to say, when only hours before he had practiced his lines for ages and ages in front of the bathroom mirror at their apartment. But now the words were not coming out so easily, with the same rhythmic flow that they had done during his rehearsal sessions. It was like all of a sudden he'd become like a clapped-out old car that stalls abruptly and fails to start, so requires a pair of jumper leads to get it started up all over again. Deborah Neeson seemed obliviously unaware that James was so obviously tongue-tied that evening, looking extremely awkward as he sat there in what appeared to be a stupefied silence. She was happily distracted by the sounds and delicious smells of the restaurant that were beginning to make her stomach grumble, for she had failed to realize how hungry she actually was, until the titillating smells of the restaurant had seduced her hunger hormones. "Goodness gracious, it's busy in here, don't you think?" said Deborah, casting her gaze over the restaurant to curiously study the people sitting at tables. She always enjoyed people watching, and observing the waiters taking off trays of delicious food to the tables. "Oh, by the way, I'm sorry I was late, but I had to take Liesl Greer to see the engagement ring at the jeweller's that you're planning to get me. The jeweller was so attentive, utterly charming he was. Frankly, I'm surprised, James, you haven't bought the engagement ring for me yet. I do wish you'd hurry up. I feel as if I'm waiting forever for you to pop the question to me and anoint my finger with that dazzlingly beautiful engagement ring. Just so you know,
I've indirectly asked Liesl to be my matron of honour for the big day. She's over the moon to be asked, of course, but she thinks it's a bit premature for me to ask her at this early stage of the day, when I haven't actually got a ring on my finger yet. I have to tell you, James, she couldn't believe the size of the rock in that engagement ring that you're getting me, said Deborah excitedly. She was ever so impressed. Her eyes grew so round when she saw the price of the thing. She says you must really love me to be buying me an engagement ring like that.
Yes, well, about that, said James awkwardly. I need to talk to you about something very important, Deborah.
At this point the waiter arrived at the table, with what could only be described as a prompt efficiency. He was eager to take their orders.
Are you ready to order? He asked, glancing from James to Deborah.
You bet I am, said Deborah. I'm half starved. She glanced down quickly at the menu and ran her perfectly manicured finger down the line of dishes. I tell you what, she said, looking up at the waiter. I'll have the spaghetti and meatballs. I have them so often and they're delicious. Should I be safe? Or should I order something a little bit more adventurous? What do you recommend? I'm open for you to persuade me to change my mind, she teased.
Well, as you were saying, the meatballs are exceptionally good. People around here are very fond of them, said the waiter approvingly. But if again you want to be a bit more adventurous, I can recommend the seafood pasta. It's absolutely delicious. People are always praising the chef for this particular dish. It does help, of course, that the seafood is caught on the same day it's cooked, so it's exceptionally fresh.
If that's the case, I'll take your word for it, said Deborah, smiling and closing her menu. Seafood pasta it is, then.
And you, sir?
Asked the waiter politely, as he scribbled down Deborah's order. He caught James's gaze for a brief moment, but James seemed somewhat distracted, almost as if his mind was a million miles away from the restaurant. He had been interrupted by the waiter, it would seem at the most inopportune time, and didn't even appear to notice that the waiter was talking to him. James, said Deborah, reaching across the table to nudge his arm. The waiter's speaking to you. What is it you want to order? James seemed to jump out of his trance-like state, rather like a frog sunning itself on a pond lily and being rudely poked by a mischievous kid with a stick. His face became hot with embarrassment, because he realized he'd been staring at the waiter without saying anything. So the blood rushed to his skin, and he began fiddling awkwardly with his menu, hurriedly glancing down the dishes on offer. You must excuse my boyfriend. Sometimes he takes a while to make up his mind, said Deborah apologetically. He can be indecisive like that. I think it's because he's a Libra. Come on, James. Tell the waiter what you're going to have. He hasn't got all day.
That's not a problem, madam. I can come back later, give you more time to decide what it is you'd like to order.
That's not necessary, said Deborah. James will have the spaghetti carbonara. She reached over to grab James's menu from him and handed it back to the waiter.
Is that right, sir? Would you like the spaghetti carbonara?
Asked the waiter, seeming to seek reassurance from James that that is indeed what he'd like to order.
It's absolutely delicious, even if I say so myself. We use a little truffle oil in the recipe. It takes the pasta, how can I say it, to the very next level.
He smacked his lips together appreciatively to dramatize how delicious the dish actually was.
Well, you've sold me on that, then, said James. The carbonara will do very nicely, thank you very much.
When the waiter had left their dinner table, Deborah looked far from amused. She glared at James for a brief second, the irritation clearly discernible in her voice. What on earth is wrong with you, James? You were so distracted when the waiter was talking to you. It was as if you barely noticed him, even though you were staring right at him. You came across as awfully rude, if you don't mind my saying so. I was so embarrassed.
I'm sorry, you're right. I've got a lot on my mind at the moment.
I can see that, said Deborah sarcastically. And if it's connected to your work, James, but I'm sorry, I don't want to hear about it. We didn't come out here on this lovely evening to discuss any issues in the workplace.
Well, I'm glad we're on the same page, then, said James with a smile. The last thing I want to do is to talk about work. I don't want to talk about the dreary aspects of my day, do I? Not when I'm in your riveting company. So where were we in the conversation, before we were so rudely interrupted by our waiter?
Oh, for goodness sake, James, listen to yourself. What are you like? The waiter wasn't at all rude. It's his job to ask us what we want to eat, and the fact that he arrived at our table so promptly shows how efficient he is. There's nothing worse than arriving at a restaurant and being kept waiting for ages before the waiter actually takes your order. And you're complaining about his efficiency? You're mad.
I'm not talking about that. What were you saying before the waiter came to take our order? Can you remember?
What's wrong with you, James? Here we go again. You seem to have a very short memory. I was telling you that I've asked Liesl to be my matron of honour prematurely. For our big day, of course. I took her to the jeweller's to show her the rock that I'm getting. Well, the engagement ring, I mean. I told you the jeweller was very accommodating to us. He said you hadn't been back to buy the rock yet, but I told him to hold on to it because any day now you will be buying the engagement ring from him. I think he's wondering what's taking you so long. But he said I needn't worry about it because that ring is not a high-demand item. It's got such a hefty price tag, which was a relief to hear because if you procrastinate for any longer, James, someone might actually buy the ring before you get a chance to, and that would be devastating for me.
Look, I think that's lovely, sweetheart, that you would show Liesl the engagement ring you want me to get for you. But I haven't proposed to you yet, have I? Isn't the runaway train moving too fast before we have a chance to actually take stock of things?
You mean the runaway train is actually you? Chuckled Deborah. You're the one holding things up, James. I'm waiting rather impatiently for you to make an honest woman out of me. But you're certainly taking your time about it, and I can't think why. You appear to be stalling. You're not having second thoughts about marrying me, are you? Because if you are, she teased, speak now and forever hold your peace.
Don't be like that, Deborah.
Be like what, James?
So unreasonable. I want our engagement to be a special event. You're making that very, very difficult for me. Because even though you know I'm going to pop the question eventually, one day very soon, I hope, I still would like it to be a surprise.
You're sweet to concern yourself with such things, James, but I don't mind where you propose to me, as long as you don't put my beautiful ring in a goblet of champagne or in a hot chicken pie. You hear stories like that all the time, don't you? And I don't want to be accidentally swallowing my engagement ring. But given the large size of it, I'd probably choke on it. You'd have to give me the Heineck manoeuvre, wouldn't you? Now that would be hilariously funny. She chuckled, obviously amused at her own joke, but James failed to find it amusing.
Look, Deborah, about the ring, said James, suddenly looking awkward.
What about it?
Well, it's very large, is it not?
Well, that's the whole idea, James. I want a big rock. You know me. I'm extravagant by nature. I love big, showy things. I'd never be happy with a small, medium-sized engagement ring. That's absolutely not me. I want a large rock that I can show off to the entire world.
The ring is very expensive, Deborah. I'm not surprised the jeweller told you it's a slow-selling item. I don't think many men would buy such a whopping-sized engagement ring for their fiancés, simply because it costs an absolute fortune.
Well, what's that supposed to mean? Are you saying you don't want to buy the rock for me? Because it's so expensive, is that it? Are you kidding me? I thought we agreed that this is the engagement ring that you were going to buy for me. You said it looked amazing on me, and I told you it's the one I wanted.
Of course I'm not saying that I don't want to buy the engagement ring for you. Nothing could be further from the truth. If you want that engagement ring, then you must have it.
Well, good. I'm glad we've got settled on that. You were really beginning to alarm me for a moment, James. Please don't tease me unnecessarily about such things. Not things as serious as this. You'll give me a heart attack. That engagement ring is all I can think about morning, noon and night. I keep imagining how magnificent it's going to look on my finger, and I can't wait to show it off to everybody.
If you really want to know, said James rather gingerly, I was just thinking that given the engagement ring that I want to get you is so expensive, I was wondering if we could split the price between the two of us. That would mean you pay for half of the engagement ring. If you did that, it could speed things up along their merry way. I would be able to propose to you sooner, and then we could arrange a date for the wedding as soon as possible. You know your father. He's champing at the bit for us to get engaged. He wants to make our wedding a grand affair, because he only wants the best for you, Deborah. But how on earth is he going to afford a grandiose wedding for us, God only knows. But he seems to have it all figured out, and for that I'm exceedingly grateful. It's a load off our minds, is it not? Let's not kid, some engaged couples have to foot the bill for their own weddings, so I'm glad we're not in that predicament.
Deborah, who was sipping her wine, looked at James with wide, incredulous eyes. What did you just say, James? About my diamond engagement ring? A moment before you were talking about my dad. Please will you repeat yourself? Because I'm pretty sure I'm hearing wrong. I have to be. Either that or I'm getting my wires seriously crossed.
I was saying, Deborah, that I really want to buy you that beautiful diamond ring that you so badly want. But I'm not going to sugarcoat things, nor am I going to act like it's no big deal for me, because it is. I'm sorry, Deborah, but that ring costs an absolute fortune. It's extremely extravagant, and of course I want you to have it. But I was wondering if you would be willing to pay for half of it. That way we can get the ball rolling, and I can propose to you a lot sooner. And I'm sure you want that. We both want that. And then we can get our plans for the wedding steamrolling ahead. Your mother herself was quizzing me the other day on the kind of wedding invitations we might like for the big day.
I'm sorry, James, but I cannot believe that you have the blatant, unchivalrous audacity to dare to ask me such a preposterous, ungracious thing. I don't believe any man out there would ever dare to ask this of their fiancé, because unlike you, they actually do have some pride and self-respect. They would never expect their fiancé to foot half the bill of their engagement ring. You've got one hell of a cheek. As far as I'm concerned, it's your job to buy me the engagement ring. If you want to marry me, you're going to have to buy that ring for me. Otherwise, our marriage will be placed permanently on hold. And I'm sure you don't want that. I love you, James, but I'm not going to budge on this one. And frankly, I'm absolutely shocked you actually had the nerve to ask this of me. I never expected you to stoop this low. You've always been a gentleman, like the time you replaced my missing purse. But right now, I don't recognise you at all. So there we are. That is the end of part 2 of our story. Part 3 is tomorrow night, and I look forward to you joining me then. Until next time, goodbye and good night.